Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Shiritsu, or Chu for short, and I am a long-time Genshin player. Well, I played this game for quite a while now. I have like about 4,000 hours in it because of my normal life. Jokes aside, this video isn't about showcasing my account or anything like that. As you read by the title, it's just a video to make a little Neuvillette guide. Something more casual, something more to keep in the background instead of having to pay attention to it. I'm not really gonna go over any statistics or read long passives or use names, technicalities and whatnot. That's something that many other people do, honestly. If I were to do that, I'd be the worst person to do it. I am not very professional. So I wanted to make this as something more casual, something more maybe for newer players or players that aren't that dedicated but still want their characters, you know, wreck shit. So, alright, we're gonna start by talking about his playstyle and what his talent priorities are. How does this beautiful dragon man work? How does he destroy his enemies? Well, that is with a giant laser of water. It's one of the most fun things in the game, honestly. He has a very straightforward playstyle, but it's also one of the most satisfying because you're just utterly annihilating your enemies while you're just holding down one button. That works with his charge attack, which is a seal that will charge around his hand very slowly, as long as you hold down the button. Once the seal is completely filled up, it will unleash the laser of water right in front of him, and you can control it around while moving the camera. It's very easy. Though you'll notice that charging this seal takes a heck ton of time. It's pretty annoying. But how you can play around that is by using his skill and his burst. That is because part of his passive allows him to absorb water droplets around the field. Now, his skill spawns 3 water droplets, which is the exact amount of droplets that you need to instantly charge up his seal, and that will instantly let you unleash the charge attack. The burst does the same thing, but it does it even better because instead of just 3 droplets, it releases 6 droplets, which means it lets you shoot 2 charge attacks instantly. So in total, from his skill and his burst, you can shoot technically 3 charge attacks. However, these droplets do despawn after a short while, so you do have to make sure that you use his burst and skill in a proper timing to where you can always have your charge attack up and not have to waste any time charging the attack up manually instead. This can sound a little complicated at first, but I'll put clips in the video to show how to do this effectively, and it also does change depending on the type of weapon and team you use on him, but we'll talk about that later on. As far as his passives go, he has 2 that are relating to his damage, and he has another one that just lets him swim faster. But honestly, even the 2 that relate to his damage are pretty ignorable, simply because while they're effective, honestly, you don't really need to pay attention to them to use them. Like this one, it lets him do more damage depending on what elemental reactions you trigger relating to Hydra. So if you trigger 3 different reactions, you get 3 stacks of it, which lets him do the most damage. But you're not always gonna need 3 stacks because in some teams he has supports that will let him do even more damage than he would if he had 3 stacks. But again, we'll get into that later once we talk about teams. Then his other passive is just a straight damage increase. Like, take my word for it, you can ignore this. It's just it's just something he'll always have up, regardless of what team you use him on. Then let's cover talent prioritization and how you should level them up, because something that really annoys me that I've noticed some players do is actually how they level up the talents of their characters. Now I get it, like if there's a character you just want to level up all the talents of because you love them, that's normal. But if you want to use your materials efficiently, there is certain talents that you should level and others that you shouldn't, because they don't do anything for the character. In Neuvillette's case, his only real important talent is his normal attacks, because his normal attacks are what helps his charge attack do more damage. So if you want that laser to really destroy your enemies, you're gonna want to level this up as much as you can. As far as his skill and burst go, you can level them up a bit because they do still do decent damage, but I wouldn't go any further than 6. Like honestly, you can even stop at 5. That's completely fine. But yeah, like I said, Neuvillette is a very straightforward character. He's just a very powerful dragon man. He'll get the job done without you having to think much. We don't really need to stay on the weapon section for long, because Neuvillette is such a strong character that as long as he gets a weapon with either crit rate, crit damage, or HP, he'll get value from it. He'll make use of it. He doesn't need a whole lot to work well. So this is a pretty easy section, but we can name a few examples because, well, some people don't like thinking for themselves. I understand that. But obviously, number 1, we got, as you can figure out by using your cute little head, his signature weapon, obviously. But aside from his signature weapon, and the weapon I actually use on him is Sacrificial Jade, which is a battle pass weapon. It's actually his second best weapon. And at Refinement 5, it even matches his signature weapon at Refinement 1. It's quite good on him, so if you have it, or if you get the battle pass, you can build it up for him, and you don't even really need his signature. Aside from that one, if you want to mention free-to-play weapons, there's Prototype Amber, which is the best free-to-play weapon for him. It works very well on him because not only does it heal allies as a little bonus, but once you use the burst, it even gives him back a bit of energy, which means you can use the burst again faster, and you can spawn more droplets to shoot more people. It's very handy. But Neuvillette gets value from any stat piece, as they call it, any piece of weapon that gives him stats that he can use. Again, crit rate, crit damage, and HP. Just remember those stats, and you'll be able to give him a decent weapon. Now, here we go. I know what you're thinking. This part is terrible. It's annoying. Nobody likes artifacts. But it is the most important part about a character build, as much as it is the most difficult. So bear with me, muster your courage, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. I have actually found a way to explain this more easily. There is no way to make the grind any easier, unfortunately. However, I have found a way to explain it more easily so you can digest it better, and hopefully that'll help motivate you a bit to get those stats that you need on your Neuvillette. But without further ado, let's just get this out of the way, okay? Bear with it for me. So, Meritus Hunter is his best artifact set, hands down. I don't know if I butchered that pronunciation, by the way. Perhaps. Regardless, it's his best artifact set because it gives him extra charge attack damage, and it gives him a total of 36 extra crit rate, which is very good for Neuvillette because he gets so much crit damage. Getting some extra crit rate from the artifact set helps having to concentrate less on crit rate, and having to concentrate less on crit rate is something that if you're not already thankful about, down the line you will become thankful about, trust me. But last thing I will mention about artifacts is his goblet, because I know a lot of you dummies are going to try and give him HP on the goblet. I do have to mention that Hydro damage bonus is the best on him by far. So unless you don't have one, make sure you give him Hydro damage bonus. HP is the second best, but there's quite a gap between the two, so just keep that in mind. Now, how have I made this easier, you may ask? Well, that is because instead of focusing on each individual stat of the artifact pieces, what I will have you focus on is your general stats. How does this make it easier? Well, because instead of having to focus on getting specific stats on each artifact, I think things should be a lot more easy to digest if you concentrate on setting specific stat goals for your character, so that instead of always looking at your pieces specifically, you will just look directly at your stats and be like, okay, I need this stat and this stat, and then you can check your artifacts and plan around what artifacts you need to change depending on your general stats. So here we go. I'm going to list down the specific stats that you need on Neuvillette depending on the weapon that you gave him. So for HP, you're going to want at least 41 or 45k HP. Anything ranging in between those two numbers is fine, if you gave him any weapon that gives HP, which includes Sacrificial Jade or his signature weapon. That is the stat goal you want for HP if you gave him any weapon with HP or Sacrificial Jade or his signature. If you don't have any weapon with HP, then you're going to want at least something from 38k to 40k HP, that is if you gave him any weapon with crit, of course. 38k to 40k HP without an HP weapon is a bit harder to reach, because weapons really help with the HP stat. However, HP is very important for Neuvillette's damage, so even if you can't reach 38k, at least make sure you're giving him as much as you can afford to. Now, moving on to the easiest stat, crit rate. Thankfully, this one is not that difficult for Neuvillette, because he has access to the Martius Hunter set, which, like I said before, gives him an extra 36% crit rate. What that means is that any number you see on your screen for crit rate, you can add 36% to. In this case, my Neuvillette has 45% crit rate. If we add 36%, that is 81%. So my Neuvillette has effectively 81% crit rate. Now, 80% crit rate, don't let anyone tell you otherwise, trust me, is more than enough. On most characters that don't do one single instance of damage, 80% crit rate will always do the job for you. So keep that in mind. But if you do want more crit rate, then at least make sure that you don't break the 64% crit rate mark, because anything past 64% will mean that you will break the 100% crit rate mark once the Martius Hunter passive is active, and that's no good. Getting over 100% crit rate is useless. It's a big waste. So anything ranging from 45% to 64% will be good for you. Moving on to crit damage, you're gonna want something from 240 to 260% if you have a crit weapon on him. That is a number that should be quite easy to reach, because Neuvillette gets crit damage on Ascension as his secondary stat, and because the crit weapon will obviously help reach that goal. And if you don't have a crit weapon on him, however, you're going to want to reach something around 200 crit damage, which may sound like a lot without the crit weapon. However, like I said, he gets crit damage as his secondary Ascension stat, and with the extra crit rate he gets from Merch's Hunter, you don't have to concentrate as much on crit rate, so you can get more crit damage on him. Crit damage on him is also very important on him for his damage, so even if you don't have a crit weapon and you have an HP one instead, make sure you at least make a goal for yourself to reach 200. Now, last but not least, because this is a stat that a lot of people overlook in Neuvillette, energy recharge. Energy recharge is very important on him, even more so than the other top DPS characters in the game, because energy recharge is what will allow him to use his burst more often. Using his burst more often means spawning more water droplets, and spawning more water droplets means you can blast people with laser guns more often. Water laser guns, that is. And I know you want to blast enemies with water often, so if you want to do that, make sure you reach something at least around 115 energy recharge, which should be fine. One thing I did want to mention for people that are using specifically the Sacrificial Jade on Neuvillette is that you can see his actual HP stat in battle if you're looking at him from the menu alone. You have to make sure you have him equipped in your party, and then to activate the passive from his weapon, you need to switch out of him for at least 5 seconds, and then you will see the little buff appear under his name. And then once you switch back into him, and even in the menu if you check, you will see a much higher HP stat. That is because the buff from the passive activated. So my Neuvillette went from 32 HP to 41k HP, which is the actual number. That is just something I forgot to mention in the stat referential section, so I wanted to make sure people who use Sacrificial Jade knew this. For constellations, I know that a lot of people usually don't bother going for them, but I wanted to cover them anyway, maybe for the one Neuvillette fanboy or fangirl out there who plans to get the character to C6. I know some of those people are out there, so perhaps this can be useful for them. But let's just briefly go over them. So C1 is actually his most useful constellation because it permanently gives him 1 stack of his passive talent that, if you remember, it's the one that activates depending on how many Hydra reactions he activates, or that are activated in the team in general. But that is just some extra damage. However, the really useful part of the constellation is that while he's using charge attack, he will actually gain resistance to interruption. What is resistance to interruption? Well, for people who don't know, it is the effect that you gain while your character is protected by a shield usually, which means that enemy attacks will not be able to interrupt you from whatever action you're doing. They will not knock you back like they would with some characters. This is very nice for Neuvillette because, as we'll see in the team building section, unless you have him C1, you will typically want a shield with him, because Neuvillette's one weakness at C0 is that his charge attack can be interrupted quite easily by enemies, even if he does move fast, which means all his damage will be mitigated pretty much from that one charged attack. Moving on to his Constellation 2, I'm not gonna bother, honestly. It's basically just more damage to his charge attack. That's really all there is to it. It's more damage to his charge attack. Constellation 3 as well, more damage to his charge attack. I'm being very blunt here with you guys, okay? Constellation 4 as well. It's odd. Constellation 4 in it of itself, it's actually not that useful. If you only reach Constellation 4, it's pretty useless, because once you learn to play the character, you won't really need it anyway. But basically it just gives you extra droplets of water, the little white and blue balls that you can use to charge up his attack faster. But like I said, once you learn to use his burst and skill correctly, you won't need this anyway. So if you only get C4, then this is quite useless, to be frank. C5 is also not that special. It only increases the level of his burst, so it increases the damage of it pretty much. It doesn't do anything else, and his burst isn't the main source of his damage regardless. So then we get into C6, which, as you may imagine, is always good. But it's actually not as good as C1. What it does, it basically turns your charged attack, your laser of water, it turns it into a permanent laser of water. Instead of only lasting 3 seconds at max, it can last indefinitely, as long as there are water droplets on field. Because every droplet that is absorbed by Neuvillette will extend the duration by 1 second. So that is where C4 comes into play, because at C4 he creates 1 extra droplet every time he is healed, every 4 seconds. So if you are going to get constellations on him, unless you plan on getting him to C6, which in that case you're either rich or I wish you good luck. You will need a lot of perseverance. But unless you absolutely get him to C6, I would only recommend going for his first constellation, because it really is the best increase of his damage and the best increase of his playstyle. It's what complements it more. So if you really want constellations on your Neuvillette, let me tell you, C1 will be more than you will ever need. Alright, let's jump into some tilt building here with Neuvillette. The man, the myth, the legend. So Neuvillette, as far as themes goes, he pretty much has endless possibilities. He can be put on many teams because he's a hydro catalyst, which means that he can cause a lot of reactions by being a hydro unit. I've only built 5 teams here, but if you guys put your brain to it, you can come up with way more than this. These are just some examples, some archetypes of what you can come up with for him. But let's just jump into it without wasting any more time. So you'll notice that Neuvillette and Farina are together on a lot of these teams because they complement each other perfectly. I'm not gonna get too deep into it, but generally they activate the Hydro Resonance, which gives more HP to the team, which increases Neuvillette's damage and Farina's support. And they complement each other in other ways as well, but like I said, no need to get into it in this video. But other than those two, LAKEY is here as a shielder because, like I mentioned in the constellation section, Neuvillette is quite susceptible at C0 from being interrupted during his charged attack, so having a shielder on your team is very useful. I put her because she also works as a cryo enabler, so while she's off field, she can apply cryo to the enemies, which lets Neuvillette freeze them, and that's very handy. You can do the same with Citlali, which means, you know, you can replace Layla with Citlali on this team, or even if you don't care about freezing enemies, you can replace them with Zhongli, who works just as well. And then Kazuha is there just as the support, another character who helps increase Neuvillette's damage quite a bit. Kazuha can also be replaced if you don't have him, or like you can replace him with Venti, or if you'd rather have a healing anemo character, you can put Jean in, or Sayo as well. In fact, I often prefer running Sayo over Kazuha on this team, but people would kill me for saying that, so let's keep it a secret, okay? Regardless, that's the first team. Then the second team is pretty much the same, except there's a discrepancy here with Kachina. because Kachina isn't the one meant to be here. It's actually Xilonen who would go here, because Xilonen works very well with Neuvillette in that she also buffs her damage just as much as Kazuha, but she also helps with his passive, and she also helps with healing the team, which is what this team actually needs, because Furina is reducing the HP of everyone but Neuvillette. So if you have both Xilonen and Kazuha, keep in mind you can, well, Furina as well, keep in mind you can build the team in which Neuvillette would do the most damage out of any other team. However, also keep in mind that in this team you don't have a shielder, so if you have Neuvillette at C0, be sure you keep your distance from the enemies. Same principle here, C0, keep your distance from the enemies, but instead this is a Hyper Bloom team, where instead of making just Neuvillette's damage be crazy, you'll also be doing quite a bit of damage thanks to Nahida and Raiden Shogun. You're gonna want to build Raiden Shogun with Elemental Mastery on this team, because that'll help the Hyper Blooms do more damage since he will be the one activating them. And you can also replace these two with Yao Yao, namely, is a 4-star that probably a lot of people have. She would work fine, and she would also heal. Or instead of Raiden Shogun, you could run Fischl, who a lot of people definitely have, and Beidou, who is also an accessible character. But this is the premium version of the team. The fourth team is it's also kind of to buff Neuvillette's damage, but it's a pretty versatile team, because it allows Emily to do a lot of damage, and Xiangling to do a lot of damage as well, while also letting Neuvillette do a lot of damage with the Vaporize reaction. So what you do in this team is basically just apply the burning effect with Dehya, Xiangling, and Emily, and then just switch into Neuvillette and start vaporizing some enemies, literally. Keep in mind that if you don't have Dehya in this team, you can run someone like Mavuika instead, who would do more damage, but again, the problem with Neuvillette at C0, you gotta keep your distance if you don't have a shield. So Dehya does cover that resistance through interruption slot, so she's quite good in this team for a C0 Neuvillette. But if you have MC1, or if you're confident in your abilities to keep your distance and not get hit, then you can also run Mavuika instead of any of these two. And as for the last team, we got an Electrocharge team. Now, Neuvillette isn't the only one being on field in this team, because Raiden Shogun is also on field on this team. So Kazuha pretty much covers the same role. However, Fischl and Raiden Shogun, Fischl serves just as a sub DPS, so her odds will be the only one doing damage. However, Raiden Shogun would also come on field for a bit. After Neuvillette is done with his own attacks, Raiden Shogun would finish the rotation off by using her Elemental Burst, and then that would also restart the rotation, and you can start things over from there. Fischl doesn't have to be here. You can also replace her with Beidou again, but if you have Beidou, then you probably have Fischl, so yeah, Fischl does work better overall. But either of them really work well, and also if you don't have Raiden Shogun, which would be understandable, you could also replace her with Beidou, and Beidou and Fischl actually do make a very good pairing, so that would work quite well. But that's all for the team section, really. Neuvillette can be run on a lot of teams, so honestly, don't copy my teams completely. Something you can do with Neuvillette is really get creative, so try to really put your imagination in it, because I bet you boys and girls have a lot of imagination, so why don't you put that to work? Try to see what team you could come up with to make the the Hydro Dragon really shine. And with that, we reached the very end of my first guide video. How was it? Well, you guys can let me know that in the comments. I'm not sure how I'll call this series. Probably something like casual guides or guides you keep in the background. Or actually even better, guides for dummies. Yeah, that's a nice one, isn't it? I think it's really cute. Let me know what you guys think. But all jokes aside, thank you for watching, really. Thank you especially for the people who watch the whole thing. That nowadays that takes a lot of attention span, but really I'm open to any kind of suggestions since it's my first video. It was a little difficult to make, so it'd also be encouraging if you guys you know, liked, share, commented, subscribed, the usual things. the shenanigans of YouTube. But yeah, pat my back, and I'll provide you with much more content from me. All that aside, thank you for watching, and goodbye, cuties.